Welcome to WinOps2018, the vendor track. My name's Tom Bevan. I'm from DevOps Group. This is my fourth WinOps, and super excited to be here because we've got a great agenda. We're going to kick off with Mark Solomon, who is the DevOps platform lead for Accenture, talking around, I think, a really sort of valuable conversation around the value prop from DevOps. Often when we talk around DevOps, we talk about tools and automation, but how do we derive the business value from an initiative such as a DevOps program within your organization? We've got until 12:10. We'll keep around 5-10 minutes for Q&A. Without further ado, over to you, Mark.
Thank you very much. Is my mic on? Can you hear me? Probably didn't have to be on. Is it on there? Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I guess we can all sort of stretch out here a little bit and use up some space. I like to think that we have the philosophers of the group here who would come to a value proposition presentation in a tech presentation. So welcome. So we can philosophize here a little bit. My name is Mark Solomon. I do work for Accenture. I'm a senior technology architect. I've been working with Accenture for about 14 years. I've been working in IT for about 19. I do run platforms for DevOps here in UK, but I wasn't always a platforms lead in the UK. Previously what I did a lot of was what we call advisory work, a lot of strategy, a lot of advising the roadmaps and how folks can adopt DevOps and these sorts of things. That's what I'd really like to talk a little bit more about today, and focus on that and some of the things that I've seen. I had the opportunity to work with many senior folks from many different industries across many different companies across many different industries as they struggled and what is this DevOps thing and why should we actually be doing it and so on and so forth. I've also had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people smarter than me and around the globe who are thought leaders in this. So I thought I would compile some of the thoughts here and share them today. So, DevOps, where are we? It's about 10 years old, I reckon. Patrick Dubois, 2009, as legend has it, coined the phrase to capture this idea that the friction between development and operations can be brought together, and we can unleash untold quality and speed and value once we get this new operating model in place. So has that been realized? It's been quite a while now, and everyone in the room here obviously has spent some cycles on it probably. So working for a consultancy, we're required to quote Gartner every once in a while, so here's my obligatory. I want to take the hype cycle. Is anyone familiar with the hype cycle? Anyone not familiar with it? It shows up a lot, right? So the hype cycle, if you're not familiar with it, I'll just talk it through a little bit. Basically it's saying that all concepts, IT concepts, engineering concepts, they start off with this, spike in expectations. Everyone gets excited about it. And then shortly thereafter, it plummets into the trough of disillusionment, where people start realizing that it's not necessarily used correctly or that it's not getting what they hope they get. And then the stability steps in, where it levels off into this plateau of productivity. So Gartner, as late as 2017 in application services, their hype cycle, put DevOps roughly halfway down this plummet, right? So what is that saying? It's saying that they're suggesting not necessarily that DevOps doesn't work, that it's bad, but it's saying that what was expected from it and what people are getting out of it is not exactly on track. And that there's some distance before the bulk of the industry make their way to the plateau of productivity. So I think this is very interesting to me. What are people expecting from it, and why are they not getting it? What's the problem here? I can say that for myself, anecdotally, with my own experiences working with folks, this isn't that far off. And I'd like to talk a little bit about a particular case, a particular client I worked with just a few years ago, where this was certainly the case. So in this particular client, a large global enterprise, I was brought on to, the transformation work had already begun, and I was brought on to help them put a roadmap together. So the strategy was already sort of defined. What they were trying to accomplish was out there, and so they were having problem putting it, plan on a page kind of thing, and lay it out there. So they brought me in as an SME and a number of other people, and we were working with them to do it. So the first thing that we did, first thing I did, was due diligence. Let's start interviewing people. Let's talk to folks and find out what's going on. What are they trying to accomplish here? So overwhelmingly, the first takeaway that I found out was that the driver, the core driver for all of this was cost savings, right? I spoke to a number of their top leaders, their IT leaders, and what I found is they had read Gartner also. They had gone to conferences just like this one, and where they had been sort of wowed and wooed with these demos of super high-speed automated systems and different architectures, and how this had unleashed all this value and made unicorns and disruptions, and all these sorts of things. So they saw this and they said, well, that's for us, right? We're concerned about our IT. It's full of bloat. Does that sound familiar, right? Our IT organization is full of bloat, inefficient, and here's this amazing press button experience. I just saw it last week at WinOps. We can do it, right? So what did they do then? They'd gone further. They hadn't just coming up with, they didn't just have their goals of the transformation. They'd also even set KPIs. This was a little draconian, but their KPIs was reduced headcount, period. Easy, obvious relationship between cost savings and the number of people you got doing things. We're going to automate folks out of jobs. Frankly, that was the case. So why couldn't they come up with a roadmap? What was the problem with the roadmap? So this is what I began to learn, is that when you bring in folks who practice in modern engineering and understand what's going on, or attempt to, then they can't really it's hard to make that connection back to that KPI. So, show up and we start talking about things like, well, you need to introduce cloud, and you need to do agile, and you need to modernize your applications, and you need to do all these other sorts of things. They don't trace very nicely back to this. So debates, negotiations, lots and lots of meetings, trying to figure out where do we get this plan on a page, how do we sell this out, and we can start mobilizing. And ultimately, what you get is a roadmap for the introduction of automation tools. Now, to be fair, there are some obligatory, if you look at the whole roadmap, there were some little pieces here. We're going to have an agile work stream, and we're going to have a cloud work stream, and we're going to look into microservices here and there and do these sorts of things. But by and large, the focus of the roadmap was I had spreadsheets. There were spreadsheets of all the different lines of business of this organization and which tools they were going to introduce and in what order and what successes they had and what kind of headcount reduction they had seen. So shortly after that, from a strategy standpoint, I stepped away from this particular client. I was not into the delivery of it, but I kept in touch because our organization was. And when I discovered about a year later, where were they? How did this work out for them? Well, they got their 5 to 10% headcount reduction. Why? Because they mandated it. They did it at the beginning. The pink slips were handed out before the tools were even introduced as a sort of inspiration for becoming more efficient. So folks were removed. So yeah, roughly, I don't know, 1 out of 10 people were looking for a new job. And what does that do to the other 9 people, right? Well, it doesn't necessarily inspire them to add new automations or new things, or at the very least, it certainly doesn't inspire them to be progressive and engaged into what the company's trying to accomplish. So it was a negative cultural impact. And ultimately, the next step was not clear. The reality is they had some successes with, especially around test automation, the basics, unit test automation, continuous integration, these sorts of things, and they had success. But it wasn't clear whether or not the introduction of those actually paid for or was paid for by the reduction of headcount. In fact, in some cases, the effort seemed to increase, even though they were getting automation in place. So it wasn't very clear. And then there was the elephant in the room, which finally had to be dealt with, which is their system integration environments, right? So you've got people building packages faster, testing them, getting quality, but it all hits a big spaghetti mess when you get to that first SIT environment, right? And there was a lot of cynicism, and it was a lot of rework introduced and a lot of chaos. So, and what happened to those other work streams, Agile and cloud? Well, they were there, but it could have been argued that they were, the general feeling was that they hadn't really introduced anything more than just the slideware, the paper that the slideware was on. Now, the reason for this is when it comes down to getting the job done, you see what your organization's values really are. For example, the conversations such as, we're not going to finish the sprint, all the features in the sprint, because we're going to have to stop early to do the pilot for the leadership. Okay, cancel the pilot, get the sprint done. So in other words, the actual commitment to Agile was tested and failed, and it was all back to this. Automate, do the same amount, do the same sorts of things, the same practices, just for less cost. Okay. So as the year ended out, the negative cultural impact, the transformation had lost momentum. There was some top-level leadership changes. New people were brought in. Some of the transformation leads were brought out, and the whole thing seemed stagnant. And just right on time, some marketing releases came out claiming success, that we are now a DevOps organization. So, why did this transformation, what's the problem here? Why is it not working? And maybe it looks somewhat familiar to some of you as to the road that your organizations go down when they're trying to do these transformations. So I'm going to take a quick page from the book of DevOps culture here and just try to ask some whys, 4 whys, not 5 whys, because I don't have that much space. But so the first question is why did the transformation not meet the expectations? Back to that Gartner hype cycle. What was the challenge? Well, the reality is that because the roadmap only focused on automation, right? So if your expectations for what DevOps is going to bring is up here, it's not the product of automation alone. So why was it just focused on automation then? And with all of the other things, all the other elements of the rounded out roadmap losing momentum? Well, simple. Because they had a very clear traced goal and KPI. So the other things, the other elements had a harder time tracing back to headcount reduction. And like I said, whenever challenged on this, they lost. They lost to get it done, faster and more efficient. Okay, so why did we do the KPI headcount in the first place? It seems like we're going backwards to the roadmap I showed you on the last slide, but it's quite clear that the whole thing was based on cost reduction. That idea of the IT bloat, let's do it. So then the question that's sort of begged to ask here is, why did DevOps, if we wanted cost reduction, then why did we select DevOps for cost reduction? Why is that really what it's all about? So, and I think finally when you get to this question, you start seeing the root cause of what I think is a problem with a lot of our transformations, is that because IT is traditionally thought of as a cost center. And if you're going to bring value via IT, which is a cost center, then it's less cost. It's the intuitive way to go forward. Less cost is easily mapped to headcount reduction, and headcount reduction is intuitively mapped to automation. But this path led us to where we were here, which is sort of a stagnated, non-transformed organization with just some new automation tools and a lot of confusion. So in summary, I suppose, going through the 4 whys, the transformation seemed doomed from the get-go because of the fundamental purpose of going with the transition transformation was cost savings. So if that's all you're really looking for, if you're just looking to reduce some costs, then by all means, automation seems like a good idea. Introduce automation, but don't confuse that with DevOps, right? Don't confuse that with what you're going to get, and don't think that just by introducing automation, you're going to turn into, Netflix. This is not how Jeff Bezos made his money, just simply automating, people out of work, right? It's building capabilities. So, okay, well, if it's not cost saving, then what is it? What KPI should we be looking at? not KPI. What was our goal? Well, what's the other side of the coin? It's more revenue, right? I'm a spoiler alert here. That'd be very creative, but more revenue. Can we get more revenue? Is that what DevOps really brings? And if it is, okay, let's humor that thought for a second. Then what KPIs do we set for that, right? We're talking about something traditionally thought as a cost center. How do you set KPIs for more revenue by what your IT team is doing? And once you get those KPIs, what capabilities do you introduce? I mean, automation, fine, maybe, but what else? How does that work? So, why is it hard to think of IT as a source of revenue? Why is it so easy to think of IT as a cost center? I think it has to do with sort of a paradox, a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. If you're traditionally think of IT as a cost center, then the paradox comes that you have to have a transformed way of thinking to think of them as a revenue generator to start a transformation which will make people change the way they think. So you have to already be transformed before the transformation starts, in other words, and it has to be on an organizational level, not just one or two people, or not just the development team or the operations. So how do you break out of this transformation? How do you break out of this paradox, this chicken or an egg? Well, the answer's simple, really. It's the leader, right? We have to be able to be a visionary and look outside and see this is the way we're going to go. This is how to step out and differentiate ourselves from our organization. Now, I'm aware that this comes across probably a little bit consultees right now, that you've got the answer is just we need a big chicken in the middle. You're a big leader. You could even make the argument that IT is a cost center ultimately. We don't sell software. We're not generating revenue by our IT work. The things IT does cost money, so we need to reduce that. Do these consultants even know how we work, kind of thing. So I get that, and I understand. So in order to try to give you my point of view, we need to consider that we're not really looking exactly at the traditional view. We're looking at the new view, and this is all new stuff. And how do you transform your way of thinking? What is the vision there that does it? And in my mind, the vision that does it is the idea of the digital company. So the digital company is the view of the future. And I know that also may come across as a little bit of consultees, a digital company, and we're all digital companies, and we've all done this before. But let me take a quick show of hands here. Who's in an organization which is currently undergoing some sort of digital transformation? Not very many. All right, well, I'll take it. Do you have a clear view of what that digital transformation means for your organization? That's very brave. Well, generally, I think that's what we see in the industry, is that it seems to be one of these sort of buzzwords that comes out, and digital, and what does it mean? We always use data. Everything's digital anyway. They're computers. But let me try to explain my view of what it means to be a digital company and undergoing a digital transformation, and then tie this back to how we can get revenue and value from DevOps. So I think in the traditional view of companies, not to oversimplify things here, the competition comes from wrangling around price and quality of your product. Everyone positions their product, and they're trying to wrangle back and forth, and an equilibrium is set, and it's difficult to kind of edge out the competition and gain extra market share. Traditionally, other functions of the organization are relevant, but they are less capable of influencing the way the decisions of your customers. That's key, the decisions of your customers. However, in perhaps the last 20 years, the new IT capabilities which have come across, the AGILE, the cloud capabilities, and yes, DevOps, have introduced a new power to influence the way people think across the board. Not just by, we got the best product at the best price, but a number of different, any way you interact with your customer, and a new differentiator has really become one of the leading differentiators in many industries. That's customer experience. The ability to Reach out to your customer in the language that they want to speak, in the channels that they use, in the lifestyle and process, in the way they want to live their life. And that customer experience is related to wallet share and market share. You get more folks buying more things, even for the same product. And I like to think about, I use my own experience. I'm not an early adopter for things. I'm not necessarily proud to say that. A little bit slow, a little bit of a laggard. So when I finally decided I was going to buy a modern phone, maybe 12 years ago or something, the iPad Touch had come out, right? The iPad Touch, and I had an iPad, not iPad, I'm sorry, iPod, the iPod. So the iPod Touch came out. I remember I remember sitting in a Starbucks with some people actually from Accenture, and we were all like, oh, looking at all this stuff. But because I'm not an early adopter, I wasn't like, well, that's cool, but I've got my old iPod here, I'm fine, it's lighter, it's not gonna break it. But eventually, you break down and you go out and buy it. So it wasn't the wowness, it wasn't the quality, and it certainly isn't the price that brought me to the product. Why did I buy my first iPhone? Because I had 3,000 songs on iTunes, right? Because I had all that music, and I was afraid. I'm an IT person, I know things can go wrong. I was afraid that I was gonna lose it, or I was gonna have to be on the phone with somebody for a long time. That's when I bought it. I bought the first iPhone so I could make that move. Why did I stay? Because iTunes didn't work right away for me. You guys have worked with iTunes before, you've probably seen this, but it was that customer support. I was shocked. I remember telling my wife when I first talked to customer support, I was like, I want to call them back and talk to them more, because they were so good. They had such insights into what my problem would be, and they were so helpful. And I'm a very cynical person when it comes to customer support like that. So I expect that many people have similar stories, and it may not be with, you may have entirely different stories with Apple or whatever, but for my case, that's why I did it. And they were already, they were already kind of locking into this. They were probably using all sorts of insights about me that they had learned through iTunes and fast responsiveness to really increase my customer experience. So it's not just a model, or it's not just a theory. There's Forrester, if anybody, another analyst, I'm racking them up. They provide their customer experience index. So on a yearly basis, they do surveys for hundreds of companies across tens of sectors around all around the world, and they rate them, correlate their revenue with their customer experience rating. And these are not publicly available, but if you get your hands on some of these reports, you can see easily that a 1% change in customer experience index, they find correlates to, at times, depending on the industry, hundreds of millions, even as much as $500 million in yearly revenue. And I don't think this, it makes sense to me, and it also makes sense, to Forrester. So customer experience is the new, it's the new differentiator that we can use all of this AI, you can use all of these multi-channel architectures, and you can reach people in new ways. We've heard all this before, but certainly it can generate more revenue. So what? What does that have to do with the original premise, which is DevOps and modern engineering? Well, what is it that sits underneath your billing process? What sits underneath your customer service, all of the different back office processes, including your sales and marketing, all these things? What is it? There's an engine. There's an idea engine. What I would say is that what enables all of these high-speed processes to work and to really, really get accurate what people want is an idea generation engine that sits underneath all of it. It doesn't matter what the process is. It's that capability. It's a revenue generation engine, and that is your IT product team, right? The ability for them to understand the needs of the customer, the ability to respond quickly, the ability for them to make mistakes and react. How accurate are their ideas? So your ability to become this digital company and therefore get more revenue is related to how many ideas can you churn out? You've heard the term, how many experiments are you running? How many ideas are you churning out? How long does it take you to get one idea out? right? You got to wait 12 months, or can you do it in you know, 1 day? And how accurate are these ideas? That may seem a little oblique, but I'll get to that in just a minute. How accurate are your ideas? Are you actually getting the right ideas? And finally, you know, does the culture of your organization permit ideas to even be made, right? Are we even allowing folks to work that way? So how do we rev up or amp up this revenue generation engine? Well, here's where some of the usual suspects we hear in the metrics of DevOps come into play, and this is why they're relevant. How many iterations are your teams running? And I say iterations here. I know I get a little bit soapboxy on this. You know, this is not releases. This is iterations. This is, we did something, we looked at it, we did it again, right? Already you're looking at, you're flying in the face of the cost center mentality because it's refactoring. It seems like rework, right? But that's how we improve. The idea cycle time. How long does it take to get an idea live? Experimental culture. However you find to measure that, but it's certainly a factor. And then, how big's your engine? How many teams are you doing? How many teams are actually doing this, you know? If you have 5 teams generating ideas, certainly 6 teams will do better, right? Six will generate more ideas. So, just to backtrack here a little bit, DevOps is the discipline, or the value of DevOps, or the value of your IT product team, I should say, is that it is the idea generation behind the real value generators, which is the customer experience, right? So I'd like to bring this to life a little bit more here, just by talking about 3 ways, because it's still, you know, it's still probably not as straightforward as the cost-saving argument. You know, we just remove people, less cost. Okay, great. So we need to rev up our engine here, rev up our revenue generation engine, and we'll get more customer experience. So to try to bring it to life a little bit, I want to talk about three different types of amplifiers that can come into play. And these are the purpose here is to try to continue to demystify this idea of revenue generation in IT. I'm not trying to give some didactic lesson here on some mathematical equation of how we can calculate all this. But frankly, it's the same thing with cost savings, because as my client found a few years ago, that even the cost savings argument, which seems so straightforward, it doesn't always, it's still just a model. So the purpose here is to show how we can demystify and show some of the models. First one's the speed amplifier. This one is going to make a very straightforward argument that the faster we go, the more ideas we'll be able to generate, and therefore more revenue. Team size amplifier, same thing. As opposed to speed, if your team is bigger, you're generating more ideas, and I'll show you how I would go about, or I have gone about modeling this. And the final is probably the most interesting and probably the most powerful, which is the AGILE amplifier. Why is AGILE really adding value? Well, I'll show you our model of that here in just a moment. Okay, let's start with the speed amplifier. How are we doing? We're doing all right. Doing all right? The speed amplifier, what you're looking at here is a simple model, kind of a bubbled up model of the kind of stuff that we might do in an assessment of an organization and a basic roadmap. That first 12 months of a DevOps transformation. So the top line here, these are supposed to be duration days of activities, not, I don't care whether it's whether they're trying to do waterfall or whether they're doing iterations. The point is, given a year's time, how does it break down across the different types of activities you do in software delivery lifecycle, okay? And then as you move forward, we can say DevOps phase 1. Well, let's introduce some unit testing. Let's do some things. I didn't list on this exactly what kinds of capabilities, but suffice it to say that each phase represents the introduction of basic capabilities, the automation stuff we're talking about. So what's happening, and my colors are not showing up very well here, but some of these are green. Some of these numbers are dropping down, right? This is a hypothesis. We're saying we believe this will happen, and we agree this with our clients, and we're not shoving it down their throat. We agree based on specific things we found in the assessment that we believe we can knock out this much time. In the end, in a model like this, we show here that what used to take 231 days is now taking 150. You also notice that not much time is knocked off of the front end. It's all sort of the back end of the automation stuff there, right? So last year, this is where we do a little analysis of the finances. Last year, the company generated X USD revenue. on the year. We're assuming that if we can go faster, all things being equal, we'll be able to lens that by, in this case, 35%, because we'll finish that work earlier and we'll start working on the next ideas, right? There's some averages here and it's high level, but the idea is that that's the, without getting into future value of money and stuff like that, this is the value of going faster. You're generating ideas quicker, you're getting them out there, and you're going on to the next ideas. If your company, if your business has a sort of velocity of how many ideas it can generate, then you're catching up to that. And IT is no longer becoming the bottleneck there. It's going back to the business. The team size amplifier is similar, but there's a subtle twist here. What we have modeled here in simple forms is 100% of the effort on day one. And as you go forward, you're actually reducing effort in activities. So it's not speed, it's the other side of the coin here. It could take longer, it could take shorter, it just takes less people to do this, right? And you can also see that as we go into some of the phases, maybe why my client found out a couple years ago that they didn't actually get all the effort reduction that they wanted. We find that a lot of, this automation is not free necessarily. Someone has to write it in the build phase. Everything as code means more coding, maybe less of this, but the effort we find tends to be a little bit less poignant than the speed. You can get much faster speed, but the counterbalance of effort shows that you're not gonna generally just through introduction of automation suddenly go down by 50% of your effort, right? So why is this relevant? Why is this just not costs? This is where the transformation comes in. You got to remember it's a transformation. What we're saying is that you're not really, it takes 16% more effort. You can cash that effort in, and I think you can research and find that the average IT employee around the world is 150K per year or something like that in USD. Multiply that 16% by that, you're going to get some cost savings. Great, get rid of them. But at the expense of all the cultural impact that we talked about earlier. Take that ratio, take the amount of revenue generated by your organization and divide that by the number of IT people. It's going to be much, much higher than 150. So the point is, if you can take this 60% and transform them into more product teams, maybe some of these folks are doing run work. Maybe some of these folks are well, they are doing build, but we can do more build now. So the point is that with the transformation, you take that 16% and you say, now we have a 16% larger team generating more ideas faster. So those are two ways to model. The third one, we're running short of time here. The third one is the Agile amplifier. So what is the thinking behind why introducing agility actually brings more value? So I want to stop and just define agility in the term that I'm using right now. To me, again, it's not faster releases, it is feedback, right? It is MVP, feedback, change, right? So if we take that situation again, we said, look at last year, how much money did you make? Let's say that on average, and bear with me on the averages here, I've only got 5 minutes, but on average, let's say we generate about 10 major features to our IT systems per year. That breaks down across all of our teams, and all of them are worth about 10 million, right? So that's our roadmap. That's what we'd like to do. But it's reasonably well known through surveys and industry questionnaires that most organizations consider most ideas to be wrong. They do not actually. They're hypotheses. They're guesses. At the strategic level, we're trying to say what will give us more ideas. It's not like you're just applying for the money and it shows up at the end of the year. It may not come. In reality, the number that I see a lot posted is 30%, 25 to 35%. Meaning you're going for 100 million, you're only going to get 30 million because 7-year ideas are not going to be good. Right? 7-year ideas, what I mean by good is that means they're not going to bring the value expected. Okay? So what do you do? Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could look into the future and figure out which of the ideas are going to work and which are not? Well, obviously you can't do that, but what you can do is the MVP, right? So if we split this into smaller, if you've built the capability in an organization to design an MVP, and an MVP again is not just a faster release, it's a smaller piece of the onion there. they're not going to be worth 10 million apiece. They're only going to be worth, this is one iteration. They're only going to be worth 5 million. You're still going to get 7 ideas wrong, but you got a whole nother iteration. You got your 6 months, so you can continue on the good ideas, and then you get another 30% of your remaining bad ideas, right? 30 times 7 is about 2.1, so I give you 2. So now you've got 5 ideas, each delivering smaller pieces of value. I've taken a linear reduction in value here, which is again just a model, but it's something that you can tweak. So you went up from 30 million here to 40 million simply by adding an iteration. Let's continue. 3 out of 10, 2 out of 5. I did some rounding here, so it's, there's a lot of fractions. But the point is that each time you're losing 30% of your bad ideas. And mathematically, you can model this as an exponential decay of bad ideas, right? Now that's a business case to me. If you can say we're going to take a transformation that will exponentially decay our bad ideas, that's the idea. So what started as 30 million, simply by learning the skill of writing, you've got your speed for DevOps, you've got your bigger teams, but you're also learning the skill of making an MVP, amplifying your feedback loops, and becoming more agile. You're enabling yourself to get more and more value. And if we wanted to push the mathematical model to its extent, you have a curve like this, right? Basically, it's an exponential decay function, and eventually, after really not much more than about a monthly iteration, you've started to level out. I think the number there will be 3.33, right? Because this is dependent on the 30% assumption. That 30%, only 30% of your ideas are going to be good. So that means you have 3.33% to gain. You have potential value there that you're not going to get because you're going to have bad ideas. You're never going to quite get to that 3.33 because it's going to asymptote off. But this is the model, right? So I suspect that looking at something like this, it may be, well, that's very hypothetical, and it is. But so, as I said at the very beginning, so is the a cost model. Everything's a guess. The point here is to try to demystify that we can make reasonable models which correlate to studies in the industry to show that you can actually get intense value for these sorts of things. I took some numbers again from Gartner, which are publicly available here, so I can show them to you. And it's at this site right here, and they provide basic financial details. And in this case, I think it was the healthcare industry. So you get the average revenue of the healthcare industry, the average costs. I think to get all of this for other industries, you'd probably pay them a lot of money. But they published this one. And we ran some numbers on this for purposes of demonstrating the model and to see how does this really work? How can you differentiate a cost approach for DevOps versus a revenue generation approach? So the current state, and note that the actual metric of value here is operating income, which is operating margin, which is it's the difference between revenue and cost, right? So it's a little bit more rounded than just saying the cost. So the operating margin, which is a normalized version of this, of the current state, based on what Gartner was publishing, was these, on average, companies in this industry had a 7% operating margin. So if you take the cost savings roadmap, remember this is where we figure out the effort that DevOps is going to reduce, we guess, which was about, in my model earlier, was about 16%, and we just get rid of all those people, and we cash in roughly $150K per person that we're paying them to work for us. You get small value, 8%, right? Now this is idealistic, so maybe you don't get all that value, but if you just run the numbers, suddenly your operating income goes up. But if instead we cash in on that, or instead of cashing in on that, we actually transform those folks, your team lens, which is now jumps up 34%. Your time lens, 1.54, and without even introducing Agile, the numbers work out to 10% operating margin. The same capabilities are introduced, it's just, in this case, the organization decides to transform their people to do more product work as opposed to just, relieve. And you could argue the intangibles here where they're, you got a happier workforce because they're more engaged now. And they haven't all been, 1 out of 10 of them haven't been given their papers. As we move into Agile, and the number of iterations, which is on the top here, you can see more dramatic jumps as you go from annual release to biannual release, quarterly, and monthly releases. Right? So in a model, if you need to make a business case for your organization to move forward with these sorts of things, these kinds of amplifiers can be shown to provide significantly more money or more value return than just banking in on the cost. So I think I'm about out of time here, and I think we need to leave some time for some questions if anybody has any. But I guess I would just leave you with these things. These revenue can be modeled. These things do. There's a lot of research out there that can help you correlate these sorts of things. And the key is amping up your revenue generation engines that sit underneath your organization, and focusing on the end goal, which is the enterprise transformation, the digital transformation. Pardon me. So.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks, Mark. That's some really, really good insights there, and a lot to contemplate when you're looking to take this back into your organisation. We've got a couple of minutes for questions. Has anybody got any questions for Mark? No? Okay, so Mark's going to be in the one-to-one room at the end of the corridor if there's anything that you do want to carry on and discuss. But yeah, thank you very much, and enjoy the next talk.
Yeah, well, I had another slide, but it was just sort of a